She managed 5,000 acres alone and believed no one would ever love her. Until a kind widowed rancher asked for her hand, the western plains stretched farther than the eye could follow, rolling beneath a wide blue sky where endless grass danced in the gentle breeze. In the late 1800s, ranches dotted the landscape like distant islands, each demanding endless labor from sunrise until long after sunset. Most people believed it took several experienced men to keep even a modest ranch thriving. Yet there was one place that challenged every expectation. It covered 5,000 acres of open pasture, sturdy barns, healthy horses, and thousands of cattle, and every important decision rested on the shoulders of one remarkable woman named Jessie. At 30 years old, Jessie had become a name spoken with respect throughout the county. Ranch owners sought her advice before making expensive purchases. Traveling merchants trusted her honest word more than written contracts. Cowhands admired her fairness because she rewarded hard work and never asked anyone to complete a task she would not do herself. She rarely raised her voice. Instead, she earned loyalty through calm judgment, careful planning, and unwavering consistency. Every morning Jessie rose well before daylight. While the stars still shimmered overhead, she lit a lantern inside the ranch house and reviewed a notebook filled with schedules, supply lists, grazing rotations, and equipment repairs. By the time the eastern horizon glowed with the first hint of morning, she was already riding across the fields, greeting workers with a smile and assigning the day's responsibilities. Every fence, every pasture, every water trough, and every herd followed a thoughtful plan that she had created herself. Running such a massive ranch demanded more than strength. Jessie negotiated cattle prices, tracked expenses, hired seasonal workers, inspected horses, planned harvests for animal feed, and settled disagreements with quiet fairness. She remembered every employee's name and knew which families depended on each paycheck. When supplies arrived from distant towns, she counted every crate personally. When neighbors needed advice about grazing land or breeding livestock, they often traveled miles simply to hear her opinion. Her confidence impressed nearly everyone who met her. She rode with remarkable skill, repaired broken gates, balanced ledgers, and understood the changing seasons better than many lifelong ranchers. Yet admiration sometimes carried an unfortunate companion. Some people whispered that no ordinary husband could ever keep up with such an independent woman. Others joked that Jessie probably cared more about cattle than romance. Though these comments were never spoken cruelly, they slowly built invisible walls around her heart. Years earlier, a few gentlemen had shown polite interest in courting her. However, most quickly lost enthusiasm after realizing she had no intention of abandoning her responsibilities. One suggested she sell the ranch after marriage. Another expected her to leave every important decision to him. Jessie thanked each man respectfully and wished him well, knowing their hopes would never match her own. Over time, the invitations stopped coming altogether. She never complained about being alone. There was always another fence to inspect, another contract to review, another wagon to unload before sunset. Work filled every quiet corner of her days. Still, whenever she watched neighboring families gather for evening meals or listened to children laughing across nearby porches, a small ache settled deep inside her chest. She wondered whether anyone could admire both her determination and her gentle heart without asking her to choose between them. Eventually, Jessie accepted what she believed was the truth. Some people were simply meant to build businesses instead of families. She convinced herself that happiness could be found in healthy cattle, honest workers, and fields that flourished beneath careful stewardship. If love had never arrived by 30, perhaps it never would. Accepting that possibility felt easier than continuing to hope. Only a few miles away lived Richard, a 36-year-old widowed rancher whose property was much smaller but lovingly maintained. Several years earlier, illness had taken his wife, leaving him to raise his young daughter while managing every responsibility alone. He worked from dawn until darkness without complaint, repairing fences, caring for livestock, preparing meals, and reading bedtime stories before exhaustion finally claimed him each night. Richard's neighbors respected him deeply. He possessed steady hands, patient manners, and a quiet willingness to help others whenever possible. Yet despite his determination, his ranch constantly demanded more than one person could comfortably provide. Equipment occasionally broke faster than he could repair it. Chores piled higher during busy seasons. Friends offered assistance, but Richard accepted only what he absolutely needed. Pride never made him arrogant, yet he believed every parent should carry their responsibilities with dignity. One pleasant afternoon, a section of fencing separating Jessie's property from Richard's required inspection after wandering cattle discovered a weak spot. Jessie rode toward the boundary carrying tools across her saddle. From a distance, she noticed Richard working alone, carefully replacing heavy wooden posts while his little daughter gathered scattered nails into a small bucket. The sight immediately caught her attention. Instead of rushing impatiently, Richard paused often to thank the child for every tiny contribution she proudly offered. Jessie dismounted beside the fence and greeted them warmly. Rather than criticizing the damaged section, she calmly suggested a sturdier arrangement that would last much longer. Richard listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions instead of pretending he already knew the answers. Together they measured distances, adjusted the posts, and finished repairs before late afternoon. Throughout their conversation, Jessie noticed something unusual. Richard never seemed bothered that she understood ranching so thoroughly. He treated every suggestion with genuine respect. When the work was finished, Richard smiled gratefully and thanked Jessie for sharing her experience instead of simply pointing out the problem. His daughter shyly offered Jessie a small wildflower she had picked nearby. Jessie accepted the simple gift with unexpected warmth, placing it carefully inside her hatband before climbing back into the saddle. As she rode home beneath the golden evening light, she found herself thinking less about repaired fences and more about the quiet kindness she had witnessed. Neither realized that this ordinary afternoon had gently opened the first page of a story neither had ever expected. The repaired fence became only the beginning of something neither Jessie nor Richard could have predicted. During the weeks that followed, they crossed paths more often as neighboring ranchers naturally did. Sometimes Richard rode over to return a borrowed tool. Other times Jessie stopped by to ask whether stray cattle had wandered near his pasture. Their conversations were never rushed. They spoke about grazing conditions, horse training, market prices, and the little improvements that kept ranches running smoothly. Without noticing it, they began looking forward to those simple meetings. Richard admired the way Jessie solved problems. She never relied on guesswork or luck. Before making any decision, she observed carefully, asked sensible questions, and considered how each choice would affect the months ahead. Watching her work taught him that experience was more valuable than pride. Instead of feeling embarrassed by asking for advice, he found satisfaction in learning from someone whose wisdom had been earned through years of dedication. One afternoon, Richard mentioned that keeping track of feed supplies had become increasingly difficult because every storage shed seemed crowded with different materials. Jessie offered to visit his ranch and suggest a better arrangement. She arrived the following morning carrying only a notebook, a measuring rope, and her thoughtful smile. Rather than criticizing his methods, she listened first. Richard explained how he organized his work, where delays usually happened, and which tasks consumed the most time. After carefully observing the barns, Jessie proposed several simple improvements. She recommended placing the most frequently used supplies closer to the main stable, labeling storage bins more clearly, and creating a weekly inventory list instead of waiting until something ran out. None of the changes required expensive equipment. They simply made daily work easier. Richard appreciated that she never acted as though she were taking control. She treated him as an equal partner whose opinions mattered. Within only a few weeks, the improvements saved valuable hours each day. Richard laughed one evening as he realized he had finished every chore before sunset for the first time in months. He thanked Jessie sincerely, telling her she had given him something more precious than money. She had given him time with his daughter. Jessie never expected anything in return, but Richard insisted on helping whenever he noticed work piling up at her ranch. He repaired a stubborn gate that had refused to swing properly for months. He strengthened the roof of an equipment shed before small problems became expensive ones. Whenever machinery needed careful attention, his steady hands restored it without complaint. Their cooperation felt natural because each contributed different strengths while respecting the other's abilities. The ranch hands noticed the growing friendship long before Jessie and Richard did. They smiled whenever Richard's horse appeared along the distant trail, knowing another productive day usually followed. Some quietly remarked that Jessie laughed more often than she once had. She still worked as hard as ever, but there was a new brightness in her expression whenever Richard stopped by for a visit. The greatest surprise came from Richard's young daughter. At first, she had admired Jessie from a distance, fascinated by the confident woman who could guide horses so gracefully across the open range. One sunny afternoon, she timidly asked whether Jessie might teach her to ride properly someday. Jessie's face softened immediately. She gladly agreed. Their first lesson took place in a quiet pasture where gentle horses grazed peacefully. Jessie patiently explained how to approach a horse calmly, how to sit comfortably in the saddle, and how kindness always built greater trust than force. The little girl listened with complete attention. Whenever she succeeded, Jessie praised her warmly. Whenever mistakes happened, she simply smiled and encouraged another try. Before long, cheerful laughter echoed across the field as horse and rider gained confidence together. Those afternoons became treasured moments for all three of them. Richard often finished nearby chores while watching his daughter beam with excitement after each lesson. Seeing Jessie patiently encourage the child revealed a gentle side that many people never had the opportunity to witness. Beneath her reputation as an extraordinary ranch manager lived a woman whose kindness flowed as naturally as the streams crossing her land. As summer gradually passed, neighbors began noticing the two ranchers spending increasing amounts of time together. Friendly teasing became common whenever Richard visited the general store. Some older couples exchanged knowing smiles whenever Jessie arrived nearby. Neither of them paid much attention to the gossip. Their friendship had been built upon mutual respect rather than public opinion, and they preferred keeping it that way. Still, Richard found himself thinking about Jessie during quiet evenings after his daughter had fallen asleep. He admired far more than her remarkable ability to manage thousands of acres. He admired her honesty when discussing difficult decisions. He admired her fairness toward every employee. Most of all, he admired the peaceful confidence she carried without ever seeking praise. The more he knew her, the more certain he became that she possessed the qualities he hoped to find in a lifelong partner. Jessie, however, remained careful with her emotions. She valued Richard's friendship deeply, but refused to imagine possibilities that might never become reality. Experience had taught her not to build hopes upon uncertain ground. She continued believing that men respected her work more easily than they accepted the woman behind it. One calm evening, they sat together outside Richard's porch while his daughter slept peacefully inside. The sky glowed with countless stars, and crickets filled the silence between their words. Their conversation drifted from ranch work toward more personal memories. Richard quietly spoke about losing his wife and the loneliness that had followed despite his gratitude for every day with his daughter. After listening with compassion, Jessie hesitated before sharing something she had rarely admitted aloud. She confessed that she had long believed no one truly wanted a woman whose entire life revolved around responsibility. Every year she became more convinced that people admired her accomplishments, but never imagined building a family beside her. She had accepted that perhaps love belonged to someone else's future, not hers. Richard looked at her with gentle understanding rather than surprise. He did not rush to argue or offer empty reassurance. Instead, he thanked her for trusting him with such an honest thought. The quiet sincerity in his voice made Jessie feel understood in a way she had never experienced before. As the evening grew later, Richard realized his feelings could no longer remain unspoken. Without dramatic speeches or elaborate gestures, he turned toward Jessie with calm certainty. He told her that he admired her strength because it protected everyone around her, not because it impressed strangers. He respected her wisdom because she used it generously. He cherished her kindness because it appeared in countless ordinary moments. Then he confessed that he loved her deeply and hoped she might consider becoming his wife. Jessie sat silently beneath the starlit sky, overwhelmed by words she had never expected to hear. Her heart, carefully guarded for so many years, suddenly felt uncertain in the most wonderful way. She finally answered with quiet honesty, asking Richard to give her a little time. She wanted to think carefully because his question deserved her whole heart, not a hurried reply. As she rode home through the peaceful darkness, the familiar ranch no longer felt quite the same. For the first time in many years, she wondered whether her future might hold not only endless work, but lasting love as well. Several days passed before Jessie returned to Richard's ranch with her answer. During those quiet mornings, she completed every familiar task, reviewed every ledger, and rode across every pasture she had managed for years. Yet her thoughts always found their way back to the gentle widower who had never asked her to become someone different. He had not admired her despite her strength. He had admired her because of it. That simple truth gave her courage to believe in a future she had stopped imagining. When Richard saw Jessie riding toward his porch, he greeted her with the same warm smile he always wore. He never pressured her for an answer. Instead, he invited her inside for coffee while his daughter happily set an extra cup on the table. Jessie looked at both of them and realized she already felt at home. Taking a steady breath, she smiled and accepted Richard's proposal. His grateful expression spoke louder than any celebration could have. His daughter clapped her hands with excitement before wrapping Jessie in a joyful hug that made everyone laugh. News of their engagement traveled quickly through the county. Friends, neighbors, ranch hands, merchants, and nearby families shared genuine happiness for the couple. Many quietly admitted they had hoped this day would arrive ever since the two ranchers began helping one another. The wedding itself reflected their personalities. There were no grand displays or unnecessary extravagances. Instead, it took place beneath a broad blue sky beside the ranch that had brought them together. Wildflowers decorated simple wooden benches, neighbors prepared generous meals, musicians played cheerful tunes, and everyone celebrated the beginning of a partnership built upon trust, respect, and affection. When the ceremony ended, Richard thanked every guest for supporting them through the years. Jessie expressed special gratitude to the ranch hands whose loyalty had helped her care for thousands of acres. She promised that marriage would never lessen her commitment to the people who depended upon the ranch. Richard stood proudly beside her, making it clear through both words and actions that they would lead together rather than separately. Married life brought changes, but none required Jessie to abandon the work she loved. Instead, Richard eagerly shared responsibilities that had once rested entirely upon her shoulders. Together they reviewed ranch accounts, planned grazing schedules, inspected livestock, and discussed improvements before making important decisions. Their conversations always included careful listening because each respected the other's experience. Whenever they disagreed, they searched patiently for the wisest solution instead of trying to prove who was right. The difference became noticeable almost immediately. Jessie no longer carried every burden alone. If a wagon wheel needed repairing while she attended a livestock meeting, Richard handled it gladly. If Richard became occupied helping neighbors with a difficult project, Jessie ensured his ranch chores remained on schedule. Their combined efforts strengthened both properties until they operated more smoothly than ever before. Workers appreciated the atmosphere created by the couple. They knew honest ideas would always receive fair consideration. New employees found experienced mentors willing to teach instead of criticize. Families living near the ranch often remarked that the place felt welcoming because kindness guided every decision. Productivity increased naturally, not through fear or harsh discipline, but because people wanted to contribute their best efforts. Jessie gradually discovered something she had never allowed herself to experience. Free moments no longer filled her with guilt. Richard gently reminded her that rest was not wasted time. On pleasant evenings, they walked through quiet pastures, watched horses graze beneath the fading sunlight, or shared peaceful conversations from the porch while the day's work settled behind them. Jessie realized that slowing down occasionally did not weaken her dedication. It strengthened her ability to appreciate everything she had built. Richard's daughter flourished within their growing family. Jessie continued teaching her practical ranch skills, but she also encouraged reading, music, and curiosity about the wider world. Richard watched with gratitude as the bond between them deepened into genuine mother and daughter affection. The child no longer viewed Jessie as only an admired neighbor. She proudly called her family, knowing she was loved beyond measure. Time moved forward with comforting steadiness. Seasons changed, cattle herds expanded, and harvests reflected careful planning rather than hurried effort. One joyful morning, Richard and Jessie received another wonderful blessing. They welcomed a healthy baby boy into their family. Holding their son for the first time filled both parents with quiet amazement. Jessie remembered all the years she had believed motherhood would never become part of her life. Now she cradled a child whose tiny fingers wrapped gently around hers, while Richard smiled with grateful tears shining in his eyes. Their son grew surrounded by patience, honesty, and encouragement. Richard became a devoted father once again, carefully balancing work with family life. Jessie embraced motherhood without surrendering her passion for ranching. Rather than viewing those roles as competing responsibilities, she discovered they enriched one another. Her children learned the value of responsibility by watching their parents cooperate with kindness every single day. As the years passed, the ranch earned recognition for more than its impressive size. Travelers often commented on the respectful way employees treated one another. Neighboring ranchers appreciated Richard and Jessie because they freely shared practical advice without expecting favors in return. Families facing difficult seasons knew they could seek guidance or temporary assistance without fear of embarrassment. The couple believed success carried greater meaning when shared generously. Young women throughout the region admired Jessie for proving that determination and compassion could exist side by side. She demonstrated that leadership required wisdom rather than loud authority. Young men respected Richard because he never felt threatened by his wife's remarkable abilities. Instead, he celebrated them openly, showing that genuine partnership grows stronger when both people encourage one another's strengths. Many evenings found the family gathered outside after supper. Richard patiently taught his son how to ride a gentle horse while his daughter offered cheerful advice from nearby. Jessie watched with quiet contentment as laughter drifted across the open fields. The sight reminded her of lonely evenings years earlier when she believed work would always be her only companion. She had convinced herself that love belonged somewhere beyond her reach. Standing beside Richard now, she understood how mistaken that belief had been. One golden sunset, as the family overlooked the wide pastures they had cared for together, Jessie reflected upon the remarkable path her life had taken. She had once feared that strength might prevent her from finding lasting happiness. Instead, the right person had recognized that same strength as something beautiful. Richard had never asked her to become smaller so he could feel larger. He simply walked beside her with unwavering respect, sharing every burden and every joy. Together, they built more than prosperous ranches. They created a home where kindness shaped daily life, where honest work was honored, where children grew surrounded by encouragement, and where love quietly revealed its greatest strength through ordinary moments shared faithfully. Their story became a reminder repeated across the Western Plains for many years afterward. True partnership begins with respect, grows through trust, and flourishes when two caring hearts choose to carry life's responsibilities together. Every single day with gratitude, hope, patience, unwavering love, and enduring joy.